Welcome to Interactive Storytelling. It's now time to turn to the remaining three groups of elemental building blocks: props, scenes, and events. All of them can help in improving immersion, but they should behave in an expected and realistic way, especially when reacting to the interactor's actions. When the interactor interacts with these objects in a fictional world, they can become imbued with life and realism. In this way, interaction can enhance the feeling of immersion, making the world alive around the interactor. Simply put, it creates a positive feedback loop of immersion. Let's start with props, which are things in the story world that can be used to make changes, but don't have any agency of their own. They are usable in advance in the story world. In traditional games, the objects usually serve a clear purpose. For example, if your inventory has an item that hasn't been used yet, it's highly likely that you will need it at some later point. This isn't necessarily true in a story world. The interactor might decide to use an item to solve a situation, but it might very well be possible that they decide to do something else. It's even possible that they don't have the item due to their previous choices. For this reason, the designer has to be careful not to create a bottleneck prop that provides the only possible solution. We actually have to change our viewpoint on props. A prop is a possibility for making a change, and not the requirement for making a change. The prop, if discovered, calls the interactor to find out its possible uses, which can be seen as the prop's affordances. A good example of this is the game NetHack, where any item can have different uses in different contexts. First of all, the player can choose the verb, which tells what to do with the item. For example, it's possible to try to open, read, or zap any item, although in some cases there's no real consequences other than a humorous comment for doing so. The next context is the surroundings, because items might be or work differently when the room is, for example, dark or lit. The player's internal state provides the next context. Items can appear different when the player is weak, confused, or hallucinating. Another context related to the player is their powers of observation, which could be altered, for example, by blindness or having an infrared vision. The player's personal characteristics or traits, such as personality or alignment, can also affect how an item behaves or is perceived. Finally, the quality of the item can also change its behavior. For example, there's a big difference between a cursed and a blessed item, or an item that is rusty or burned. Ideally, any combination in these different contexts should be covered. You can think of this as a multidimensional matrix with different attributes, where every entry would have a value. It would really matter if you read a burnt scroll in the dark with infrared vision while confused, or if you zapped a cursed one while being blind and hallucinating. In NetHack, this idea is summarized in the player's maxim, "The dev team thinks of everything." Fictional universe is constrained only by what is revealed to the audience. The Russian short story writer and playwright Anton Chekhov gives an example that if there's a rifle hanging on the wall in the first chapter, it has to go off later in the story. This Chekhov's gun is a narrative principle stating that everything presented in the story should be significant and the author should remove everything that has no relevance to the story. For example, point-and-click games adhere tightly to Chekhov's gun by highlighting only the active items on the scene. This allows the player to know that during the course of the game, something needs to be done with these items. In the case of interactive storytelling, it's more accurate to extend the concept into Schrödinger's gun. This combines Chekhov's gun with the quantum physical concept of Schrödinger's cat, where unobserved aspects of the world exist in multiple simultaneous states. The rationale here is that only if the rifle on the wall is observed by the interactor, it must go off at some later point. Otherwise, it will remain in a superposition as a possibility that was not realized by observation. In other words, the introduction of a prop doesn't exclude any possibility from the interactor. They can ignore the prop if they want to and go on without it. However, if they pay attention to it and, for example, take it with them, it might turn out to be useful in some of the possible paths. The next elemental building block is a scene, which is an environment or location where the story takes place. Scenes break up the physical space of a specific experience. In many ways, it resembles the idea of a level in video games. Scene design is actually close to level design, which focuses on arranging the architecture, props and challenges, and making sure that there's a right amount of challenge, reward and meaningful choice. To set up the space in which the story takes place, the designer has to set the initial conditions of the scene, the set of challenges for the interactor, and the termination conditions of the scene. Moreover, the designer has to define the aesthetics and the mood of the scene. The last elemental building block is an event. It's a specific change that happens once triggered by a condition. Events can be caused by natural forces or some other sources. If we use an author-centric approach, events are a way to introduce dramatic changes. Even in a pure character-centric approach, events could be set up beforehand by the designer to cause dramatic changes. For example, a tornado passing through a village is going to shake up the situation as some of the characters die or are severely wounded, and property is destroyed or dislocated and lost. Not every event needs to have a dramatic afterthought. There can be mechanisms that cause events conditionally or based on time. They could be part of the story world and possibly later on utilized by the interactor. Now that we have reviewed all the 4 elemental building blocks, let's summarize them. Characters keep the interactor interested in the story and allow them to identify. For this reason, the characters aim at being as human-like as possible. The key thing is how they respond to the situation at hand, what kind of initiative they show, how they differ from other characters, what makes them unique and identifiable individuals. The other building blocks of the story world include the props that characters are using, the scenes where things are happening, and the events that propel the story forward. As we have seen, each of them have their own role in making the story world alive and converting it to an interesting place to be and to experience stories. With this, we are ready to leave the story world behind us and head to the last set of videos, which aims at providing various perspectives to interactive storytelling. See you there.